Welcome everyone. This year marks a special year for MDEC as come August 1st, MDEC will be celebrating its Silver Jubilee, 25 years in leading the digital transformation of Malaysia. From its inception as the Multimedia Development Corporation, MDC, to implement the Multimedia Super Corridor back in 1996 by Tun Dr. Mahathir, the agency is indisputably a game changer in the ICT and digital landscape of Malaysia. Reflecting on the dynamic nature of technology and digital, change is inevitable and has played a vital role in growing and placing MDEC to its current perch, the digital mandate and trustee of Malaysia. Change is the only constant. Change is the challenge, and in change, therein lies the opportunity. Happy 25 years of bringing positive changes to Malaysia, MDEC. And here's a video to bring back some fond memories of your astounding achievements. Here's to 25 more great years ahead. Enjoy.
We are talking about changing the way we live and work within the MSC.
MSC Malaysia was established in 1996 with the aspiration to becoming a global hub for ICT and multimedia innovation, operations and services.
I'm honored to be the first local Malaysian being the CEO of MDEC. So that shows how it benefits the locals. At the same time, I think MSC has also attracted many global MNC investing in Malaysia.
Malaysia will continue to make progress in the digital economy. And in this regard, I think the role of MDEC will be even more important in the future.
I think MDEC is very, very passionate about doing what we need to do. What's most important thing is the impact. What is going to be the impact on the society? How does it going to improve upon the society? And the choice is yours.
Vision, this MSC MDEC idea came about, and without this vision, I don't think we can have our own digital economy. We cannot have our own animation and content industry.
What we hope to help do using the MDEC platform, using the government's platform, is find things that work, and how do we actually scale that? What are practical solutions?
Happy 25 years once again to MDEC. Congratulations for all of the great initiatives so far. We look forward to many, many more great years ahead. Now let us begin from the very beginning on building a digital nation. This next session will give a glimpse on how MSC was first formed, its journey, and where it is at now. This session will be moderated by Dr. Nikolai Dobberstein, partner Kearney Inc. Malaysia. Over to you.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. This is a very exciting session, a true trip down the memory lane, especially for me. I still remember when I first came to Malaysia in late 1996, when I was with McKinsey. I was working with Dato, Dr. Arif, Dr. Noor, and the late Tansi Osman out of Bangunan Kita Asli to help create the MSC and set up the MDC, which of today, of course, is MDEC. What is exciting about this panel is that we have multiple generations of MDEC leaders, board members, and pioneer clients. What a great opportunity to hear your stories, understand how it all started, learn what is and was so special about the MSC, and also understand the lessons learned on how this has shaped the MSC as it is today. As we have limited time, let's get started. Let me pose an initial question to each one of you, maybe in sequence of the MSC evolution, and then open up for a broader discussion about the lessons learned and the path forward. Let's start with our founding member, Dr. Noor. Very good to see you again after a very, very long time. You're one of the MDEC members for the MDC. I still remember our joint time at Bangunan Kita Asli, opposite the Twin Towers, which were just being built. Maybe would be good to hear from you, where and how did it all start? What were some of the biggest and most exciting initiatives during your time?
Oh, thank you, Nikolai. It's such a great time now to see that we don't age in action, but as what we can see, we are always looking at the impact that we have created until now. I think the fact that in 1996, it was really a very strong team that wanted to shift Malaysia from very much an industrial base to a content-based industry. I think that was really a mindset shift. And that transformation is not easy because, number one, policies are not new that have been developed before. And there was no act that is called a Multimedia Act that was already in existence. So we have to do everything from scratch. Not only that, a lot of people are always looking for the incentive, looking for the tax exemption. So we have to drop the 10 bills of guarantee in terms of what will be the best to be given to the people who are going to come in and bring in the value chain of respect to the so-called industry content. Now, I think the fact that we did not even have the human capital, that was a big challenge even when we were in Silicon Valley, where the questions asked to that time to the Prime Minister itself, our beloved too, that time was, are we ready with the fact that do we have enough software engineers? Do you have content providers? Do you have all that to make such a big vision? At that time, it was a really, really big question with the fact that we are all very new. And that time, the late Tan Sri Osman was looking at me, winking at me, and said, that is the job that you need to do, human resource capital. So I got to go back, look at all the universities and look at all the course content that developing content that is related to IT. But there were very few people who were just doing help desk, content development, that's all. So very few. So can you imagine from where we were before, there was no people, and there we have this big vision on how to create even the first initiative, the 7 flagship. What about the smart card, the telemedicine, the telehealth, the e-government, the smart school? It's all very, very difficult because at the end of the day, people are talking about the bandwidth, the fiber optics that was supposed to be wiring up the whole Multimedia Super Corridor area. So there was a lot of initiative that need to be put on the ground when the fact that content was what we're supposed to deliver. I think more so when we had the first incubator called the MSC Central Incubator, we were just parking our, our resources at the Multimedia University, where we believe that was the first batch of people that could come out with the ideas of what it takes to be content developers, software engineers. I had the first batch of 77 SMEs that time parking themselves on trying to, do something that can make themselves known. So it's everything following the Silicon Valley model. So in that time, we don't even have a venture capital. We don't even have what it takes to create the ecosystem. So we are all muddling through with the policies, with the regulators, with the service providers, with the new players that wants to come in on board. So imagine we were all struggling and muddling through in giving answers to the people. It takes us about 2 years, I believe, that we're all able to settle down because we got a lot of documented documents ready. And when we had the first MSc status approved, it was a big joy for all of us because MITI that time did not understand what is content development and how do you assess something that is of what it called virtual basis to be considered as something incentive to be given. So all this, I would say, it was an element of you cannot picture out what was the image that we are trying to do. So I think the passion that we have, the first team of people that drive was the passion. We have to deliver. So when we walk the talk is what I think what we see today. If we had not walked the talk, we have not seen the fruits of what was the journey of the Multimedia Super Corridor. That's what I need to give a talk to say.
I just wanted to, you reminded me a lot of the MSc then, and I think the passion definitely was something unique about this. Tan Sri, you took over as chairman from the late Tan Sri Osman, who was really one of the founding fathers of the MSc. Obviously, by the early mid-2000s, the multimedia world had changed, especially after the dot-com bubble. What were some of the key initiatives and focus areas during your time as chairman? And what were some of the key challenges you faced? Tan Sri.
Well, let me first begin by saying that I got involved with MSc initiative when I became the Chief Secretary to the government in the middle of 2016. And MSc has already been launched or announced by the Prime Minister. So I entered the scene, with a great deal of expectation, but with very challenging environment. Because to me, whatever, initiatives taken must have the backing of the government and the government infrastructure at that point of time. And for me to organize the buy-in from all the departments, from government, from ministers, was extremely useful. Without the buy-in, you will find that the support from government departments will not be to the level that we expected. You must remember that when Dr. Noor mentioned about the various flagship applications, all those flagship applications are meant to be tested, tried out in Putrajaya. We are supposed to be the test bed for many of the innovations or the creations that come out from MSc. And to get the governments, or to get all the government departments, to get the officers to be, so-called up to the mark in giving the kind of support that we expected, was a very challenging task. Because government departments, ministries in particular, are very conscious, are very jealous of their powers, and giving up some of those powers to, say, an organization like MDEC was sometimes something not very easily done. So that is the challenge at that time. Of course, Dr. Noor also mentioned about lack of skills and so on. It's true. I suppose that's the reason why in the Bill of Guarantees that was developed, all the companies are allowed to bring in more unlimited knowledge workers in order to help support the various activities taken by the companies. But another important thing is, of course, as we all know, the brainchild of the MSc initiative, of course, it came from various studies from McKinsey and so on. But the man who really pushed this forward was the Prime Minister at the time. I think without the support of the Prime Minister, and his really hands-on approach, I don't think we would be able to have achieved the kind of success that we did even during the first phase of the MSc's existence. So to me, the support, the leadership support, and the buy-in from the government officers, government departments are very, very important at that stage of development of the MSc. Of course, when Tan Sri Osman retired and he passed on, I was made the chairman of MDEC. So with those background that I had, I think it helped me a lot in trying to, push for the various actions taken by MDEC and to ensure that the various initiatives become successful. But even then, it was not easy. You might understand that the funding comes from the government. We have to make sure that the government is happy with what we are doing. And in addition to that, there are, as I said earlier, till the end, ministries, government departments thought that, the MSc initiative was an MDEC job. MDEC should deliver. They forgot that that required the support of the entire government machinery. And very often that MDEC was blamed for trying to push other departments to do certain things in order to realize the objective. So in short, I just want to say that I want to highlight the importance of this strong leadership at the top, and then the buy-in from the various departments, ministries, and so on, in order to achieve what we did during the first period. First period was from 1966 to the year 2000. Well, that's my contribution at the beginning. Yes.
Thank you, Tan Sri. Very nice, and that reminds me of very good memories as well. Now let's turn to our industry representative from NTT, Hendrik. NTT was a key supporter and pioneer in the original MSc setup, driving multiple initiatives across urban planning, ICT infrastructure, and various flagship applications. Hendrik, as NTT, how much have you benefited, and are you benefiting from the MSc status? And did you have a first mover advantage?
Thanks, Nikolai. In 1996, that's the year that I actually started to get a job. My first job was 1995. So I'm more an entity representative rather than a person that was very, very involved in the setup of MSc. So, but I get a lot of information from all my company details and stuff like that. So let me try my best to share with the rationale behind in 1996. So I think at that time, obviously the government was putting these MSc ideas and was going to the US and Japan to look for technology company to try to get them to invest in Malaysia, cyber giants. And NTT definitely is one of them, being invited to even be the international advisory panels of MSc as well. And at the time, NTT dispatched many specialists and the commercial teams to try to come out and set up an R&D center or the business center in Malaysia, try to facilitate knowledge transfer as a know-how in R&D, especially network and data center and other advanced technologies. In fact, one of the staff, I think probably you guys remember him, Takaya-san, was actually based in MDC. I'm not so sure you guys remember him.
Yes, we do remember him, Mr. Takaya.
Takaya-san, right? He was based in
Kobayashi. And Dr.
Kobayashi was
Kobayashi.
yes, Kobayashi-san, and at the time it was up to fast forward to about 1997. This entity is thinking, why don't we actually build data centers, which is a professional data centers for people who host their IT equipment there. At that time in 1997, only Japan has got some. Maybe US, there is none in Malaysia at that time. So those days, people have the data center in their office. So people like Maybank will be on the 6th floor, huge floor of data centers. It's a new idea. So it's a very new idea. And NTT decided to do that. So so we spent 2 years to construct that. That was ready for service in 1999. So that was the first big investment that NTT did under the MSc program. And we are the first foreign company at that time was awarded the MSc status, if I remember correctly. So in fact, our sister company, NTT Data, which also quite involved in one of the project, which is the e-procurement project with commerce.com. In fact, they have some JV, I remember. After they deliver the application, I think they have exited the JV for a long time already. So those were the days. So obviously, NTT benefited based on those key incentives. Obviously, the government had given us some tax incentive, even though we were not, obviously with a huge investment, the first 5 years, they probably get a negative. So at that point, but yet we still get some of the benefit of the incentive. I think the other key one will be the exemption of the local ownership requirement, which the global MNC probably will like a lot, and also the unrestricted employments of the local and the foreign knowledge worker. Having said that, we have very, very limited foreign knowledge workers here. I would say we have 5 probably in the whole company of 500 people right now. That is from Japan. So the rest are mostly locals, including me. So I think we sort of those are the benefits that we actually got it out of the program. So I think that's all I can share.
No, thank you, Henrik. I think this is good. And I remember really NTT had a massive contingent of people in the MSc initiative. It was really, I think, a driving force. It was really, I think, without NTT support, I think many of the initiative would have not been off the ground so quickly. So thank you. Let's move to Dato Sharil. Of course, you have been at a long-term involvement. I think you were an advisor to the MCMC, I think, and then later you were a board member, both of MDEC and the chairman of the Multimedia Commission. Dato, how have you seen the MSc evolve over the last 25 years?
Well, that's quite a lot. Thank you, Nikolai. Good to see you, Tan Sri, Dato Badlisham, Dr. No, Surina. Hello. My involvement in MSc Malaysia, and I'd have to distinguish between Multimedia Development Corporation, as I first knew it, MDC at the time, and then subsequently MDEC. I think it was around that period in 1996, 97, as this was being developed. I was actually in the private sector as a lawyer, and we were helping advise a lot of the MSc companies, or rather MSc candidate companies, apply for MSc status. So that was my first involvement with MSc Malaysia at the time. Subsequently, I joined the MCMC, which is also one of the other agencies that was developed, or the act was promulgated around that time to also complement the efforts of MSc Malaysia, because it was not just, as Tan Sri Halim said, not just an issue of MDC at the time developing the ecosystem, but there had to be other support from other government departments. And one of them was the telecoms regulator, which was coming together to bring together telecommunications and broadcasting. So I formed the pioneer team in MCMC and found myself, as my first engagement with MDC at the time, sitting on the MSc Licensing Approvals Committee with, I think, Tan Sri Othman Yop was chairman at the time, with Datuk V. Danabalan, who later became my chairman of MCMC. But at that time, he was in charge of licensing, and also Dr. Arif Noon, who was there, and also the other gentleman who I forgot. Yeah, Datuk Kana. And thank you, Datuk Sham. And this was early days when there wasn't really a real blueprint. We had an idea of what we needed to do, and we sort of wrote the manual as we went along. That included things like MSc Malaysia wanted to have dual provision of fiber into a building in MSc Malaysia. I wanted to have dual power sources, but then we discovered that was not possible because of the nature where Tenaga Nasional was running power lines in Cyberjaya and Putrajaya and many others. I think where we started where there was no blueprint, there was no how-to manual. There was a dream, there was a vision, and I think I was very fortunate to be part of that. I think as we went along, then I was very fortunate to be, as I went back to the private sector, and I think Tan Sri Halim was one of the ones responsible for bringing me back to the board. So I came back, when I was in the private sector, I came back and sat on the board of MDEC, where I got to see a slightly different organization. By that time, Tan Sri Halim was already chairman, and we went through the first iteration, I think, Tan Sri, of the review of MDEC. So I also got to work with Datuk Badlisham which was also very interesting. And not long after that, I ended up coming back to the MCMC and becoming the regulator COO. Then I found myself working closely with Datuk Sham, trying to then work through because some of the policy issues, for example, a lot of the MSC companies were asking for licenses to operate in the telecom space. NTT, for example, was one of the early birds who came in, and I think subsequently AT&T and many others came. So we took the view, for example, once an MSC Malaysia status was given to these foreign entities, they could actually enjoy the benefits of that, which included 100% foreign equity to be an operating company in Malaysia. Otherwise, the national policy at the time was you must have majority Malaysian owned company in order to qualify for a license under the MCMC ambit. So later on, I became chairman and chief executive of the MCMC. I stayed on actually on the board until I think about the time when Tan Sri Halim, I stepped off, I think, when I went back to the private sector in 2015. So I've seen the whole evolution of MSC Malaysia from MDC to MDEC and now 25 years on to what it wants to be. I think we've along the way we've learned a lot of very valuable lessons, but I think also one of the challenges, if I may, is that others have also started catching up. So we need to do better. I'll stop there, Nikolai.
Thank you, Dato. I think that's great. Dato, shall we just test the?
Hi, how's that?
Perfect, good. So the question really, Dato, was I think when you took over in the MSC, what had changed in the evolution, and what did you do to address it? Because obviously the times had really changed over the years.
Well, just like the rest, thank you for having me. This is a trip down memory lane. As Dr. Sharil mentioned, I was also in the private sector with Hewlett Packard, and we were involved to some degree with the Multimedia Super Corridor. But as a Malaysian, I was excited because we had seen what the country had done in the industrialization part, bringing in companies like HP manufacturing to the country. This was the way the country wanted to push into the information age, information technology age. So I was very honored, but also quite worried about taking on the job in 2006 as the CEO of MDC then. Yeah. But the thing I discovered then, if I may, my impressions in the early days was, the story is that Tan Sri Halim, when he welcomed me to MDC in Cyberjaya, he opened his curtains at his office, which is true, he did. And he says, job number one is to fill this up, which is Cyberjaya, with investments, IT companies, knowledge workers, etc. So I think it was at a inflection point, maybe, when I took over. The other thing I observed, obviously coming from the outside in, was the creation of the MSC and MDC was to help Malaysia transform. Yeah, the word transformation was quite heavy in McKinsey's materials, Nikolai. But maybe we had stalled in terms of what we were looking at in terms of quantity versus quality. So I remember one of the KPIs for MDC was to achieve 10,000 MSC companies by the year 2000 or 2020, something like that. And that was a very high numerical number, 10,000 MSC status company. So I asked the team and others outside, I said, do you know how many IT companies there are in the United States? Nobody can tell me, Can you tell me how many IT companies or technology companies there are in the United Kingdom? Nobody can tell me either. How many IT companies are there in Thailand or Singapore? And nobody can tell me, for some definitive idea as well. So again, it boils down to this numerical number that we were obsessed with. We needed 10,000 MSC status companies. I think we wanted 150,000 knowledge workers. But I think we didn't know where or what these companies were supposed to do, or in terms of breakthroughs, transformation. So I think that was the effort that at least my era was looking into, to look at some quality elements rather than quantity. Yeah. Obviously, we had some misses, but I think we had some hits as well. Can I also come back to what Tan Sri Halim said about the fantastic support the head of the government gave to this initiative, which is very unique around the world. We hear the leader of the country does support, but he doesn't provide personal leadership or involvement to drive this, except for Multimedia Super Corridor. So that was something that was very unique. Unfortunately, as Tan Sri Halim also said, one of the transformational part about transforming Malaysia was the government part. And over time, the government machinery ministries had looked at MDC equals to the Multimedia Super Corridor. Yeah. So if you're wondering out there why the MDC is now called MDEC, it's because in 2006, that's what we did. We split the brand of the MSC, Multimedia Super Corridor, from the company that was supposed to enable it, the MDC, which became MDEC. Yeah? We chose those acronyms because then we didn't have to change too much of the logos and the stationery, etc. But it was a very important psychological break to let people know, especially those who are supposed to execute, not MDEC, but MDEC was supposed to help enable, provide some guidance, put in policy papers together with others, including other stakeholders, but allowed both the government machinery to execute. And that's why we had to split those elements too. So that was my remembrance of the early days of MSc and MDEC.
Dato, very nice. Thank you. It's very nice, good to hear. Surina, 25 years later, the digital economy now accounts for 20% of Malaysia's GDP. Obviously, clearly a remarkable achievement. What's now the next chapter in the MSC's progression?
So thank you so much. It's wonderful to hear everything that I've heard just now. First and foremost, I just wanted to give a shout out to all the previous leaders. I inherited an organization that I think that I'm proud to say, like, every single person at MDEC has this immense passion and this DNA of a change agent to continue to push the mission forward. And so that's something for sure we'll continue to do from here on. So let me just quickly take a step back and then just frame where we are right now. So earlier, Dr. Noor talked about, in the very beginning, it was all about mindset, and making sure that we had the right mindset, building up talent, getting leadership support. There was no how-to manual, and there were lots of things happening at the ministerial levels as well. Today, when I first came into this role, let me just, I'll just characterize like 5 key themes that was happening, that's shifting, that's influencing where we are today. So number one, the first thing we see is that when it comes to digital, in the very beginning, we were all very focused just on ICT. It was a very confined space, but over time, the borders, the boundaries started to blur. And so you started seeing things like, it's not just digital within one industry, you started seeing things, application of digital in various different industries. And so the borders started to you see this confluence of digital technologies. That's number one. Number two, we also start to see increased regional competition, globalization, a lot more activity happening in the region as well, and the rise of Southeast Asia. That's another thing that's happening right now, which makes us think that when we used to think that the future is forward, one fine day we'll get to that goal, but the reality of it is that the future is actually now. Today we have a digital economy, we have an ICT industry. Where do we go from here? How do we leverage that? And how do we, all these things are, the future is actually already here. And what COVID has done really has made not just Malaysia, but the whole world, a world that's digital by default. And so digital is all around us, tech is all around us. So what does that mean, and where are we in our evolution? So where we are today is basically the democratization of digital. And so Tan Sri Halim just now talked about how in the early days, MDEC, it really did seem sometimes that we were the ones that were going around championing, and everybody thought that it was MDEC's own responsibility to do all these things around digital. But I'm happy to say now that we've now embraced digital as a national agenda. And so this is something that we've democratized. We now have the digital economy blueprint, My Digital, and we have the digital economy for our council that's championed by Prime Minister himself. And we've got private sector, we've got a much better understanding in terms of what's required now to make sure that we continue to build a digital economy. So we're very excited about that. Now, what needs to happen from here on, and what are we focused on at MDEC today? It's basically scaling. It's scaling all the things that we do well already. So over the last 25 years, there have been many things that MDEC has done, programs, initiatives that have done pretty well. Like, for example, programs to train entrepreneurs, programs to mentor startups. But how do we continue to actually scale that, to make that bigger? Because today it's not enough to just impact 20%. We need to actually figure out how do you impact the other 80% of the digital economy. So figuring out ways to scale. And so public-private partnerships is the way to do that. So working very closely with the private sector to continue to build out digital capabilities to drive adoption, so that ultimately we become a society that's fully integrated with technology.
Thank you, Surina. Wonderful to hear. I think it's good to see that the spirit of the MSc is still there and it keeps going. I think we probably have just a few more minutes left, but maybe I think might be good to hear from each of you as a reflection very briefly. What can we learn from the past, from the MSc so far, building on where Surina was going, that allows us to accelerate the MSc progress now going forward? Maybe I think if I start with you, Tan Sri, if that's okay.
Well, I think I'm very happy to hear what Surina just said. Acceptance by the whole country about the role that everybody should play. I mean, there's now an integrated approach, But this is good. We all know that the development of MSc or MDEC is an evolutionary one. It improves as the years go by. The result has been very good, though it could have been better. But to me, there's one still big issue that needs to be addressed, and that is how to ensure that our universities produce graduates that are really in demand by the industry. There have been so many complaints about IT graduates at universities are not up to the standard, so to speak, to be employed by the private sector. But I'm aware that there has been consultations between universities and the private sector and in the industry about the kind of skills that are required. That has been going on for many years, but the outcome is still very much to be desired. I think more effort should be put into ensuring that the training that our graduates get at the institutes of higher learning or the colleges and so on should be relevant to the industry. And what more now is AI and other applications which require really a high skill among our graduates. A more effective method of collaborating between the universities and the private sector should be undertaken.
Well said, Tan Sri. I think well said. I think we all know it's still a challenge. Dr. Noor, what's your one takeaway from the 25 years of MSc and advice to, I think, Surina going forward?
Yes, I think human capital has always been an issue continuously, because at the same, in those days, we are just creating knowledge, something that was never there. Now it's application based. Now I like to take the challenge with the fact that a lot of our fresh graduates, when they want to come out, they're looking for a job. Now we're talking about IT, it's not about job related, it's project based related. So if you are looking for a job, you want to find job description, it's not there. So in the fact that now we are not just producing products, we know that out of product, there's a process, there's an application that needs to be done, but the community that we are going to focus, the benefit to the community, that is where they call the people. But now the people are not just looking at the economic return, it's the planet. We are talking about sustainability now. We're talking about issues that is very global, respect towards how can we improve all these element of hazardous areas and areas that needs to be fixed because human has already destroyed it. So the fact that application comes into the process, where that's why you see application like Grab, like Uber, like Lazada, they're all application based with the market, they have a market space that develop the prosperity element. So to me, under my sustainability element of what we do, we're not going to make people see a job. They have to look at it in the form of project. Now the transformation is all about the mindset about, well, how do you look at IT as a job or as a project-based application that's supposed to service the community, service the planet, and service the economy. So in terms of the fact that people are very much silo thinking, here, when you talk about IT, it's an integration. So when we talk about integration, there's an element of partnership. Now, a lot of people like to do things alone. So this is where they will always be siphoned off, and they will always never be greater than the other. So we're talking about global economy right now. The fact that if people have not open up in terms of the gate, in terms of how we look at it, but the fact that the global phenomena of digitalization has bring a lot of issues like fintech, issues like elements of the global community. So that needs to be addressed as one issue that I think a lot of regulators may not know how to handle. So I think the assessment of what we believe as project-based as compared to product-based or process-based, that needs to be reviewed. That's my understanding. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Noor. Dato Badlisham, what's your guidance going forward?
Well, take it with a pinch of salt. The MSc was created around the time of Vision 2020. And I personally had, my expectation was that because it was created during Vision 2020 as well, as Datuk Sharil has mentioned, other countries have obviously caught up to the uniqueness of the MSc since 1998. But COVID actually represents a great opportunity for this transformation. I'd like to see, I'm not putting words in Surina's mouth, etc., but I'm a Malaysian citizen now, and what I'd really like to see is take advantage of this COVID, where MDEC, kind of inverts its role, rather than doing point-to-point execution. I'd like to see MDEC actually take on the higher level execution of pushing this government and this country into a transformation towards a digital economy. For example, what does it take during this crisis for the Malaysian government to commit 100% of its government services to be online? The availability of services through mobility or the mobile devices. That will really get us to a point where we actually help transform this country. And then, the other stuff like knowledge workers, etc., while there needs to be point solutions, working with partners, as Surina has mentioned, is very important. I mean, MDEC cannot be the only organization chartered to actually to drive the success of digital Malaysia or the digitization of Malaysia. It cannot be. That's why Datuk Sharil and I, at that point in time, we were having healthy discussions because the role had kind of overlapped. But MDEC should play its role as an enabler. It was created, it was a special purpose vehicle created to help push this transformation. And we were the only one who could reach out to MCMC, reach out to Ministry of Agriculture, reach out to the Chief Secretary's office and say, this is what needs to be done. We need your support because we were created to enable this transformation. So if anything, that should, perhaps be the way forward. But it starts with saying, I think we need a death day. We need a day where we are going to close this organization or transform it to something else. Listen, there's nothing personal about this. This is about transformation of the country. But then working backwards, what accomplishments do we need to see? It's not about 10,000 students who took up big data, because tomorrow we'll need another 50,000, and that needs to be done. I'm not saying it should not be done, but the higher level items are the one that's going to sustain this transformation for Malaysia towards a truly digital economy that's going to make us productive relative to our competing neighbors, because we're not competitive. We don't have a new way forward. And I was hoping that the MSC, MDC, MDEC, Digital Malaysia, digitization of Malaysia, would help push us along that path for the next wave of economy, which is required for our next generation. So quite a patriot in that sense.
Thank you
to see that happen.
No, thank you, Dato. I think a lot of good guidance on challenging guidance to Surina, actually, and I'll ask her to react in a second. Henrik, any guidance from you?
Well, I think the technology changed very fast. The companies that is good in the new technology, or the company that the name that you hear, you never hear in 1996, right? But in 5 years' time, the new company that is coming in, that you will never hear. So we need to really keep evolving and really looking at what is going on in the market. But looking at this COVID, it actually triggers something big in the workplace transformations. So potentially we will lose a lot of jobs, but potentially we will win a lot of jobs, because people now can do the job from India. So if we want to protect or grow our IT, export our IT services, I think we need to be very, very cautious and plan for it, because we see massive standardization of services or technology services or BPO. This is massive going on, and the big players come in the old day of outsourcing and managed services. In the old days, in 1999, the big boys, the IBM and all this, will come and say, hey, all these IT equipment, 6 floor of them, I'm going to manage for you. But today, all these are gone. Today, people come with technology, come with applications, come with the services to actually offer you a service for your finance or for your HR or for your whatsoever, or for your IT technology support services. And these people are putting 80% of the resources in India. I do not know why. Is it because of cost? Is it because we don't have enough IT people or what? So these are the things that are happening. Even within India, they're starting to break into tiers of the cities. The tier 1 cities, you have the knowledge worker, they're probably dealing with the customers and stuff like that. Then they have worker in the tier 2 cities. In the tier 2 cities, doing the admin work, the punching of the data and stuff like that. And they're heavily built on robotics. They're heavily built on robotics in the applications. So we need to know this is happening in the industry, and how can we also capture the market shares. So there's something that we need to learn. NTT has got quite a fair bit of services, exporting our services to other countries. Emirates is under us. We are supporting NTT Communication. We do have another close to 100 headcounts supporting the services of Hong Kong, Singapore, and non-English speaking countries. We do have that services within NTT, but we see this trend is going to be massive, whether BPO or IT services, centralization of services, or services is going to a remote area, is going to happen.
No,
so in Malaysia,
yeah. No, thank you, Henrik. That's thank you. Dato Sharil, before I then go to Surina.
Yeah, I'm just going to take a little bit out, a little bit extra on top of what Datuk Badlisham had said. I think it's useful. One of the things that we need to think about, as we want to go forward, is to look where we came from, and I think this session is very useful. But I think one of the things that I would like to just make as a suggestion, and let's not forget this: when MSc Malaysia was first conceptualized, it was MSc Malaysia for the world. Nikolai, you remember this? It was not just MSc Malaysia for Malaysia. So I think a little bit of that we need to bring back, because to some extent, of course, we have to prioritize ourselves first as Malaysians. But I think there are still unique elements of what we have here in Malaysia, which we potentially could still bring forward and bring out. Now, that could be inbound or outbound, and I'll leave that open for discussion. We've seen some companies of Malaysian companies like Custom, for example, now have gone via SPAC to the US. Maybe this is what we need to look at, not just inbound, but outbound. But I do agree with Dato' Sham that some things that we should have achieved by 2020 in terms of digitalization of government services and all of that, we could have done better. I'll stop there, Nikolai.
Thank you, Dato. Very interesting. Surina, obviously a lot of good and radical suggestions to you, but maybe I think it would be good to get your view, how you see it going forward from here.
Yeah, so thank you very much. So first and foremost, when we think about technology, it's something that's always evolving. And so the job with technology is never done. And especially when you're playing a role of an enabler, that's something that I think there's always going to be a need for an organization such like an MDEC to facilitate, to help drive, to help advise the many, many different facets, especially given the institutional knowledge that we've built over the last 25 years that we'll continue to build on. I think that we all, when we look at the aspiration of My Digital, for example, and all the different plans that we have in place right now, RMK12, Kemakmuran Bersama and everything, what we're envisioning really for the country is a country that is prosperous, a country that is globally competitive, and one that fully embraces technology. We see that in all the different dasar that's out there. Mosti has their dasar science and whatnot. And so I think that that's something that you need many, many players with different expertise to contribute towards that. And MDEC, we've always been a change agent. We've always been an enabler. And I think that's something that we will continue to do. And but we will need to do that in a very focused and dedicated way. So we know where we would need to focus our time on. And so today we now know that with My Digital, for example, there are many, many different facets of it. And the great thing about the blueprint that we have right now is the fact that we have others that are really embracing and holding themselves accountable to certain aspects of things. So for example, infrastructure. So we've got our Jendela plan to make sure that we continue to build out the appropriate infrastructure for the country. Government digitalization, so we have that too. And so the government has committed to adopting cloud and ensuring there's 100% digital literacy amongst all civil service. And so they're embracing that, and all the different clusters, leads are actually doing that. So for MDEC, where will we play and what will we do? I think we will continue to remain very focused on the areas that we have been helping to push forward from here thus far. So we view it as we call it NADI basically. So N stands for new skills, because we now know it's talent, but making sure that the country embraces this whole concept of skilling. It's not just skills of the people in the universities, but people that are on the jobs already today, the workforce. So new skills. Adoption, because today it's not just so much, it's not enough to just create the technologies, but how do you adopt that? And how do you make sure that our SMEs actually adopt digital and adopt technology? There's a lot more that needs to be done on that area, and working collaboratively, we need to be able to accelerate that. Disruptors. So it's the tech ecosystem itself. How do we make sure that we have the most innovative companies that are out there, the Carsons of the world that can then go and compete outside as well and disrupt, and not just disrupt the tech industry, but the other industries as well. There's plenty of applications of technology that requires a lot of effort and focus. And then finally, making sure that we continue to invest in digital, both locally and also making sure that there's continued investments into the country as far as digital is concerned. And so there's still plenty more to do. And so I think that certainly, the work, we have lots of work cut out ahead of us, and we hope to continue to have the support of the government as well as the private sector and all the different partners in academia as well, because we view our role really as to help connect the dots and help enable and help accelerate development of this inclusive, integrated society that we're trying to build.
Thank you, Surina. And I think we're now at the end of a very exciting session. Thank you all. Thank you all for joining. It was a real pleasure for me to see many of you again. For me, the MSc creation remains one of the most visionary and most memorable projects I had the privilege to participate ever. Thank you very much for reminding me of these outstanding times. Thank you, and let's go back to the main session. Thank you.
Thank you to our esteemed panelists comprising of pioneer members of the MSc journey for sharing their experiences with us on lessons we can learn from the past and the direction we can partake in the future. And thank you also to Dr. Nikolai for the excellent moderating. It was indeed truly a dynamic panel session indeed. And we have more coming your way. But first, let's now take a short break for you to grab lunch and refresh yourselves. Coming back, we do have more exciting insights to share with you. In the meantime, please fill out the survey for this session if you've not already done so. Meeting and chat rooms are also available for your networking experience. And we'll see you back here at 2 p.m. for the next session. Enjoy.